Hey everyone, this is Pastor Bob, and this is time for our midweek message. And over the last few weeks, we have been looking at why we do some of the things we do as Christians. That means looking sometimes at history or our tradition and just asking the question, why do we do that? And today I want to talk about something that most Christians do, but believe it or not, is not universally enjoyed. But before I get to that, I'll start off with a story. When I was new in my faith, had a call to ministry, I think I was just finishing my undergraduate. I really felt God calling me to ordain ministry. We can talk more about that at a different time, but one of the problems I had is I didn't like speaking in front of people. I would get terribly, terribly nervous. And I knew the only way to overcome that was to exposure therapy, to actually do it. And so I had talked to my pastor at my home church, and I said to him, listen, I feel God's calling me to ministry, and a big part of that, matter of fact, the primary part of my role will be preaching and teaching, and I can't get up in front of people. And he says, you know what? Why don't you take over our 8 o'clock service? I said, 8 o'clock service? I didn't even know we had one, but we did. It was fairly well attended. It was more for weekend warriors, people that wanted to get in and out, so they had the whole rest of the day to do things with their family or whatever. And it had one component that was really the main draw. It had no singing. And I asked him about that because I had not seen a church where there wasn't singing. And he says, yeah, we have a large group of people here that if they had to come to sing, they wouldn't come to church. And I empathize with that because I'm not a strong singer. I have been compared to a cat in a dryer by people who know what they're talking about. And so I'm not the strongest singer either, but I try. And he said that, and this wound up being true, that there have been traditions within Christianity where they don't use music, or they might do chant or different forms of worship. And I thought that's interesting, and it led me to thinking, well, why do we sing? Why do we do that? Why do let's say, the big majority of Christians sing and worship? And it led me to think about other churches I had visited. I had visited some larger, more contemporary churches, and I noticed that each one of those, you would have a bunch of people coming in right after the songs. Now, in most growing churches, the sermon goes about 45, 50 minutes, and they'll start out with maybe 2, 3, 4 songs. We'll talk about why in just a minute. But I noticed a lot of people coming in after the songs were done or as they were coming to a conclusion. And I realized that a lot of people just don't like singing, or maybe they never learned how to sing. My kids, who are in their 20s now, were never required to take a music class. The school district we were part of focused on the STEM aspects. Now, my daughter, for instance, took choir, but it was an extracurricular activity. They were never required to take any music classes. So a lot of folks, my generation and younger, maybe don't know how to read music or don't know how to sing. And, if you think about it, and I can certainly empathize with this because I'm not a strong singer, you're in a new church around new people. There's music going on. You're not a strong singer, so you don't want to sing out loud and have everybody looking at you, right? You don't want to just sit there like a bump on the log. What do you do with your hands? Where do you look? It can be an awkward experience for many people. So anyway, as far as I'm concerned as a pastor, if you're part of any church I'm at and you don't sing, that is fine with me. You can hum in your heart. You can absorb the words. You can be praying in your heart, whatever you want to do. If you're not singing, you'll never get a weird glance from me because I get it. But it leads us to ask the question, why do we sing? And that's what I want to cover a little bit today. Now, number one, the reason we sing, I think, is to help center us for worship. There's something very powerful about music, because even if you don't like singing, which is many people, they still love music. And there's something very powerful about it emotionally. And what it does in a sacred setting, and that's why you normally see it at the beginning or at the end, is it draws us out of the secular world and all of our problems and the things we're worried about and the things we're thinking about, and helps us emotionally and mentally become centered on worship. There's something powerful about it that it just takes us out of our normal thoughts and our normal concerns and our normal whatever and prepares us for worship. And so for a lot of churches, the music is centering in a way, it's talking about God, it elicits an emotional response if it's well done music. It gets us thinking about God and so on and so forth. And it prepares our heart from worship. It becomes a separator between ordinary time and sacred time. So that's very important. The other reason, I'm sorry, not the other, there's many. Another reason is because they teach us. If you are a fan of the old hymns, and yes, many churches still sing the old hymns. As a matter of fact, we do here at 2 of our services. You'll notice that they have quite a bit of didactic or teaching elements, and they're also, many of them, theologically fairly deep. And you got to remember that throughout world history, most people could not read. And so in a church, everything was a teaching moment. Stained glass windows told stories from the Bible. Murals on the ceiling told stories from the Bible. The sermon, of course, direct exposition of the Bible. And then, of course, the words and music had a teaching element. And one of the neat things about music is when you repeat and you get familiar with the song, it's a much easier way to remember important theological or doctrinal or biblical points in the form of music than, let's say, a sermon. And hey, I like a good sermon as much as any of the next guy, but let's be honest. Can you remember what I preached about last week? The week before that? No, but I bet you remember the song. So they're an excellent teaching component. Another reason we do it is because the Bible says to. I know the psalmists say in many places, always be singing a new or making a new joyful song before the Lord. And you see singing and musical instrumentation throughout the Old Testament. We see it in Acts and we see it in the New Testament. So it's part of what God tells us to do. I don't know that it's one of those things, it's a hard line. God says you must always do it, but it is a part of our tradition and our history, and it is biblical. And the last reason that I want to cover today is the emotional aspect of it. We talked about it centering us, but see, worship should engage us. Worship well done should engage us on many levels. It should engage us on the spiritual, it should engage us on the mental, and it should engage us in the heart. And music is a powerful way to engage emotion. If you've ever taken a class on music theory, you realize that, some ways of writing music, like the notes going up or the notes alternating or a lot of minors or different keys, all can elicit within us a different emotional response. And good songwriters know that. They know that if I want a joyful song, it needs to be like this. If I want a more somber song, it needs to be like this. And so writers write with the intention of eliciting emotional response. And we know music is already powerful, but music well done with a strong intention can help us worship at the emotional level. Excuse me. Matter of fact, there was a time in church history, mid 1800s, all the way up through the 50s and 60s, actually maybe even a bit before that. But if you'll notice that hymns, a lot of hymns from that period were bland. And that was on purpose. There was a trend going through Christianity, a pietist movement, a holiness type movement that well, we'll get into that another time. But what they thought is if we made music powerful and elicit strong emotions, it might stir up a naughty emotion in you. So what we need to do is make music as bland as possible, theologically sound, but as bland as possible so we don't stir up any enthusiasm, is the language they would have used, entheos. Conversation for another time, but we don't want to stir up any naughty emotions in people. So you'll notice a big section of hymns in just about every denomination's hymnal, not all, but many of them are just very bland. And maybe you grew up with some of those, but the thought behind them was that we shouldn't stir up emotion. Unfortunately, that's not biblical. God created us to have emotions, and in worship, we should be engaging the spiritual, the mental, and the emotional. And songs and good, well done music can be a powerful way to do that. Anyway, there's many reasons we sing. It fosters unity, it brings togetherness. If you've ever been part of a choir, you know what I mean. If you're not part of a choir and you'd like to join one, we've got, kids and adult choir here. We also have a musical ensemble. That's another category. We have a praise team. That's another category. If you are interested in any music program here, shoot us a message. We'll get you involved. But looking at singing specifically, now we know why we do that. All right. Thank you.